Hi, welcome to Quirky Queen's Journals. My name's Kirsten. So today I am making an abstract using jelly prints that I had made. I showed them in the previous video. So I am sticking to three colours: naphthanol, crimson, indigo blue, gold, and also white paint with black markers and black pencils. So I decided to use the collage as a starting point, so it's like the main feature of this and it's where the abstract is built from. So this is a charcoal pencil. It's just a cheap one from B&M. My daughter got me a set and they're hard, medium, soft. Unfortunately, the medium and the soft break every time I use them, but the hards are great. And they've still got a bit of blendability if you're wanting to do that. So that paint colour that I put on, I forgot to put it on video, but it's basically white, the crimson and the indigo blue mixed together with more white. And what I'm doing here is I'm trying to give a bit of a blend, a bit of an ombre. Now there must be a more artistic word than that for it. Basically trying to use the colours to make a bit of highlights and accents. I suppose the red in this case, the pinky red, is more of an accent. A graduation, that is a better word. So I have sped this video up to 5 times as I really wanted to keep it more in real time, but it was just too long. So I ended up using a cotton bud to put the last lot of paint on with, and the only reason I used the cotton bud in the first place was I think I was using it to fill in a gap, and then I just kept going. So that has led to me using more of a kind of blending approach in this painting, and it's not something that I normally use within the abstracts. However, this is just naturally where this one went to, and I've actually really enjoyed it. And it also got me thinking to mark making. There's a lot of videos about mark making. I myself do it as well. We use all sorts of items to make marks with. But blending with the paintbrushes made me realise, we do so many marks with the paintbrushes, and the blending is something that I've actually been neglecting in the kind of, in my pursuit of making other marks. Now this blue colour, it's not the nicest. It's indigo blue and white, but I end up adding some gold into it. And this gold is, see the gold and the white together? It's a beautiful, rich beige colour, but still very pale. And then when it's added into the other colours as well, you'll see it when it goes into that baby blue. It just matures it up so lovely. Another thing I'm really enjoying as well is using a limited palette to create your colours, because everything just works so well together. And also when it's all laid out on the palette like that, just adding in tiny, you're almost using the colours to create your accents. You just say, add in just a tiny wee bit more blue here or a wee bit more red, and it just changes it. And it helps you create the sort of, the lights and the shadows, and they just work so well together. So this is the second video I've made where I've took this art journal approach where I'm doing 2 pages at the same time. And in the previous occasion and on this occasion, one picture comes together really quickly and, it just seems to work, and the other picture is what you spend most of your time on. However, in both circumstances, I think that the picture that didn't come together and that you had to work hard on actually ended up being more interesting. When it comes to doing these lines with the markers and the pencils, I am trying to be as loose as possible, almost so that I'm not participating in it. That might sound strange, but just trying to let those lines make themselves so that they're not stiff. So this is that baby blue with a little bit of gold added in, and it just lifts that colour. It really does. So at the moment, I'm thinking the one on the right looks like a little cottage with some farmland, and the one on the left makes me think of a waterfall, just purely because there's a sort of gathering at the bottom, you know, with all the pencil marks looping. I absolutely love that shade of purple that has been made. So that is a mixture of the indigo blue, the naphthanol crimson and the gold. And I think it's one of my favourite colours. I'm really enjoying painting two pieces at the same time. I find there's a lot less pressure on me to create a good painting, and also I don't think about composition, and hopefully I've done enough now where the composition should come out a little bit subconsciously without having to overthink it. But before it, you know, it was prioritised over everything, and it shaped what was happening. I've been using a glue stick as well to stick down my collage. I initially started using it because I was very low on matte medium. But then what I like about it is the fact that I can change my mind, or I can look at the piece stuck down and decide, am I ready to commit to that? But obviously it's not very secure in the long term, so I will put a layer of matte medium over the top. So this is really where I start doing a lot of blending. I'm using, I'm putting down some paint, and then I'm using dry brushes or my fingers to try and blend it further. And if the paint's got to the stage where it's just dried that wee bit too much, I'm using more of a wet paintbrush to blend it. So, but I do notice when I watch the video back that what I keep doing is the dry brush that I bring out to blend the paint, I keep dipping it into the paint. So right at this moment is where I'm using the wetter paintbrush to blend. It feels like when I'm using the dry brush that I'm buffing it. Like when you're putting on your makeup and you keep going over with your big giant brush. But I do think the blending really elevates it. And I think it actually, the more sharper lines, it really does enhance them. And I also think the blending really helps with giving more form to the shapes. I do feel like it's hard to describe. It gives more depth to it. It makes it look like it's got angles. I found a great channel yesterday, and it's called the Epic Art Channel, and she really goes over the fundamentals of art really well. They're quite short videos, they're very clearly defined, and the only thing is she hasn't put a video on in 4 years, but what she has put on previously is it explains it very, very simply. So the big black marker, I do notice that whenever I put it down, I immediately come out with the white paint. I actually think that having the black marker under the white paint is, I really enjoy that. But on its own, it still feels quite kind of dominating on the page. But part of me thinks that it's probably the fact that I'm using A5 size, and maybe if I was using A4 or A3 or even bigger, that it would be less overwhelming. One thing I do notice about the gold paint is once I've, obviously I'm mixing it into the colours, and once I've put on a few layers, it does start to get a sheen to it. It's kind of like an even sheen. But I'm hoping that when I put matte medium over the top, that actually that would counteract that. And certainly with the white, I do think it's beautiful. I really like putting the paint down and lifting it off with the tissue paper, because I will end up putting it back down onto the page. But anytime I see myself using like that crossword book to lift the paint off, I think, no, that's such a waste. Use the tissue paper. And I did it out of laziness because the tissue paper is on the shelf behind me and not on the desk. One of the things I'm loving about the limited palette is you're discovering colours that you just wouldn't pick up if they were in a tube. And also, I think there's a vibrancy to the paintings that when you're not mixing the colours, that same vibrancy isn't there. And I think as well that it gives me a lot more freedom. I don't think about how well the colours are going together as much, what's complementary, and etc. I stumbled my words there. And I suppose not thinking about the composition as much and not thinking about the colours in it as much as maybe just letting me relax a bit more and paint. When people talk about painting, what's the word? Not instinctively. I want to say unintentionally, but that's not it either. It'll come to me. Intuitively, that's the word. I also like when the pencil marks are down. In this case, I've used the charcoal pencil that I mentioned and also a China marker, because I almost use them as little areas that I can fill in with the paint. So it kind of makes more organic type shapes. Sometimes when I see myself holding the paintbrush really tightly like this, I'm thinking that's because I'm struggling. I'm not sure what I'm doing. But other times when you're doing a sharper line, you do have to hold it further down the paintbrush. Do you see, painting with red, blue and purple, it's actually a colour scheme that I would never have chosen. And also what it's made me realise, this is probably the first time ever that I've not used a complementary colour that I've stuck with. Is it analogous colours? I think that's what they call it. And I think that made it easier to work with as well. And also using the gold as my kind of neutral colour. I really like that because I didn't really think of it being the kind of neutral colour when I started, but that's kind of what it became, is what I added to make it look a bit more. I suppose that's what added the maturity to the colours. I think adding that bit of that blue stripe collage to the top of the one on the left, I think that's what kind of made that one. I could feel that was, that was one of the finishing, the sort of start of the finish. But I'm also really aware that I'm completely lost with the one on the right. As soon as you change 3/4 of it with one colour, it gives you an idea that you're like, not sure where this one's going. But at least you know that you've reached a point where you do need to make a big change. I also find when you're doing two pieces at the same time, that what you put in one, you do want to add to the other one as well. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. Is that what makes it art journaling? The fact that you do create, you do try and keep some similarities, but obviously make them different because there's no point in doing two otherwise. Oh, this is me starting my favourite thing, lifting off what I've put on. I should have known this was next when I seen that big lot of paint going on. And also scoring into it with the skewer. I mean, I've had these skewers on the go since I started painting, I think. They're years old. But they just, with all the paint that ends up on them, it just, I suppose, changes their shape over time, and that's what makes them interesting. It's amazing how much better that one on the right looks now. With just putting down that lot of paint, lifting it off, and then lifting some of the collage off and putting a few score marks in, and it really has just brought it to life. So the one in the left has a lot less layers, and this actually wouldn't have worked nearly as well on that one. So I'm just applying some more paint, and then I'll use I think I actually used the China marker this time. And, oh, there's me lifting off more paint with things that are not tissue paper. But putting the paint on as well has actually helped sort of highlight those score lines. So it's not just about what's underneath them, but adding on top of it, they also make a difference with. Do you know, that's the same cotton bud that I've used since the start. So here I start adding in a lot more sort of areas, and so I use these as shapes to paint them in. I've actually purchased some glazing medium today, so it's arriving tomorrow, because I've noticed that the transparent paints I really like using them, and I'm also hoping that I've got lots of little tubes of Liquitex Basics paints, so I'm hoping it's actually going to help them go further as well. But I'm really interested in the building of the layers, so I do like the transparent paints for that. Also, I wonder what that would be like with the blending as well. Oh, there I go with the dry brush again, buffing away. In fact, I do that quite a lot here. I do notice it's the buffing with the dry brush that seems to bring out that even sheen from the gold paint. So what I'm liking here with doing these different areas and this sort of different colours is that it is creating a lot of angles, and it's making it look like more of a 3D scene. And you can see there's just so much more going on in this one than there was in the one that was sitting on the left. However, I still do feel like the one in the left was finished, and I think that to add anything to it would change what it is. As in, if you added something small, I think it would look out of place. I think that you would really have to radically add something to it to for it to sit right, but at the same time you would basically be changing it. I think this one on the right's starting to look like a bit of a dilapidated shopping centre. I think it's because obviously the paints are, there's kind of different colours. You can see what's underneath, and the lines between them aren't very sharp, as if there's been wearing away with the weather. So we're very nearly at the finish here. Do you know, one thing I've noticed though is I've kept quite a lot of that original collage, which makes me very happy because it does mean that I have centred the painting around that. But also that happened quite naturally. I didn't force that to happen. I also added in some white on the left-hand side of the one on the right, just to try and keep the eye focused more on, that right side, the right 2/3 of the right-hand picture. So this is tissue paper that I used to remove the paint earlier on in the video. And it's really just the finishing touch to this. I think it brings a bit of cohesion between the left and right side, and they're less separated so that it doesn't look forced, basically. So I'm very pleased with how these turned out. I think it was a good learning curve with regards to using, the limited colour palette and also blending with the dry brushes. I'll definitely be doing that a lot more. So I hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you soon, and take care. Thanks very much for watching.